Section 5.2 is on dividing polynomials. To divide a polynomial by a monomial, divide each part of the polynomial by the monomial. So, for example, to simplify, 18x squared y plus 27x cubed y squared z divided by 9xy, I'm going to rewrite it as division problems. So 18x squared y over 9xy plus 27x cubed y squared z over 9xy. Now, simplify each one of those fractions. 18 divided by 9 is 2. X squared divided by x is x, and my y's cancel out. Plus, now let's do the second fraction. 27 divided by 9 is 3. X cubed divided by x is x squared. Y squared divided by y is y, and just a plain old z. So there's my answer. So to divide a polynomial by just a monomial, divide each part of the polynomial by the monomial. To divide a polynomial by a binomial, we need to use long division. And this is going to be very similar to the long division that you learned back in grammar school. So I'm going to put my x plus 2 out front, and then my polynomial underneath the bar. And since this is a polynomial, I don't really have place value like I do in regular numbers, you know, the tens column, the ones column, the hundreds column. But in this case, I'm going to think in terms of an x squared column, an x column, and just a plain old numbers column. And actually, if I had higher powers like a cubed or a fourth, I would have those as well. So to do this, I'm going to start with just the x out front here. What do I have to multiply x by to get an x squared? Or to say that another way, x squared divided by x is what? In this case, it's x, so I put it up on top. X squared divided by x gives me an x, so I put that on top. Take this x and multiply it by the whole binomial. Use the distributive property. X times x is x squared. X times 2 is a positive 2x. Draw your line like in long division and subtract. X squared minus x squared is 0. Negative 8x minus 2x gives me a negative 10x. Bring down your negative 26, and let's do it again. Negative 10x divided by x gives me a negative 10, so that goes on top. Negative 10 times x plus 2, distributing that is negative 10x minus 20, and subtract. Negative 10x minus negative 10x is 0. Negative 26 minus a negative 20 gives me a negative 6. So that gives me a remainder of negative 6 over x plus 2. Since it's a little crowded, let me write my final answer over here. So x minus 10 minus 6 over x plus 2. Now, if that was a little confusing, there is an easier way to do it, excuse me, and it's called synthetic division. It's a much simpler method of dividing a polynomial by a binomial. So here's how you do it. So I'm going to start, so I have 2x cubed plus 3x squared minus 4x plus 15 divided by the binomial x plus 3. So I'm going to write the coefficients of the polynomial. So that would be a 2, a 3, a negative 4, and a 15. So keep the sign in front of it. And then in the little box here out front, I'm going to write the opposite of this. In other words, if x plus 3 were to equal 0, what would x equal? X would be a negative 3. So I put a negative 3 in the box out front. The other way to think of it is just do the opposite of whatever you see there. Now, draw a line. I'm going to give myself a little bit of space here, a line underneath here, and just bring down your first coefficient. Bring down the 2. Now I take the negative 3, multiply it by the 2, and I put that number here. So negative 3 times 2 is negative 6, and now I add these. That's going to give me a negative 3. Do it again. This negative 3 times this negative 3, put the answer there. Negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. I put a 9 here, and now I add. Negative 3 times 5 gives me a negative 15, and now I add. Now, because my polynomial was an x cubed, and I'm dividing it by an x, the highest power of my answer is going to be an x squared, because x cubed divided by x is x squared. So this is the x squared column, this is the x, this is my plain old number, and actually we draw a line right there to show if there's any remainder. So this will turn into, and now these are the coefficients of the variables. So this is going to turn into 2x squared, squared because it's 1 down from the cubed, minus 3x plus 5. And that's my answer. Let's try another example. Simplify 4x to the 4th plus 2x squared minus 4x plus 12 divided by x plus 2. Looking at our polynomial, what you should notice here is I go from a power of 4 to a power of 2, completely skipping x to the 3rd. So I need to actually include a 0 there, a 0x cubed, when I'm doing my columns. So I'll copy my coefficients. So the 4 is the coefficient of x to the 4th. I need an x to the 3rd, but I don't have one, so I need to put a 0 there. 2 is the coefficient of x squared. Negative 4 is the coefficient of x. And then I have a 12. In my box out front, since it's x plus 2, I'm going to put a minus 2. Draw my line, and I'm ready to do my synthetic division. Bring down the 4. Negative 2 times 4 is negative 8. Add. Negative 2 times negative 8 is 16. Add those. Negative 2 times 18 is negative 36, and I will add those. And since I'm at my last number, I'm going to end up with my remainder here. Negative 2 times negative 40 is a positive 80. Adding those, my remainder is 92. So what does this mean? Remember, these here are the coefficients of my x's, and since I started with an x to the 4th and I divided it by an x, my answer is going to start with an x cubed, and the coefficient of that is 4, and then it just works its way down. 8x squared plus 18x minus 40, and that's going to give me a positive 92 over x plus 2. And that's my final answer. Synthetic division is a lot easier than doing long division. And our last example here is a little more complicated because what we're dividing by is a binomial that has a coefficient in front of x, a coefficient other than 1 in front of x. So in order to do this, I need to divide everything by 2. So that's going to give me the coefficients of my polynomial are going to be 4, negative 2, 1/2, and 2. And what I'm going to be dividing by, so I need to divide 2x plus 1 by 2. That's going to be the same as saying 2x over 2 plus 1 over 2, or that's going to be the same as x plus 1/2. So the number that's going to go in the box out front here is a negative 1/2. Now, I just do my synthetic division as I normally would, and I'm not going to freak out because I have some fractions in there. I'll go ahead and put my little remainder bar there. Bring down the 4. Negative 1/2 times 4 is a negative 2. Oh, you know what? I made a mistake. You know, did you notice what I forgot to do? I don't have an x cubed in here. I need to go back and change this. So my coefficient of x to the fourth, half of that is 4. I don't have an x cubed, so I actually need a 0 in there. And then a negative 2. And then a 1/2. And then a 2. Oops, forgot about that. Okay, let's try this again. Bring down your 4. Negative 1/2 times 4 is a negative 2. Adding those is a negative 2. Negative 1/2 times 2 is a positive 1. Adding those gives me a negative 1. Negative 1/2 times negative 1 gives me a positive 1/2. Adding those gives me a 1. And then negative 1/2 times 1 gives me a negative 1/2. And adding those gives me a positive 3/2. So, writing my final answer, my highest power here was to the x to the fourth. I was dividing by an x to the 1. So my answer will start with an x cubed. So that's going to be 4x cubed minus 2x squared minus x plus 1. And now let's deal with this remainder here. So that's the same as 3 over 2 being divided by x plus 1/2. And that looks absolutely horrible, except that you can multiply both the top and the bottom by 2. So that's going to give me 3 over 2x plus 1. That's going to be plus a 3 over 2x plus 1. And that's my final answer.